In this episode of the garden potting bench build, I'll make the form and cast the concrete countertop, then add the sink and upper and lower shelves. In the previous episode, I built the frame, poured footings to secure it to the ground, and added a corrugated metal roof. This video will focus on pouring the concrete countertop, setting it on the top rails, installing the sink and drain plumbing, and adding the top shelves. Then finally adding the bottom shelves with the corrugated panel back wall. The concrete countertop will be poured in a shallow form made with a melamine-coated board and walls. The back of the countertop will be notched around the center back 4x4 support. I'll be casting 2 holes during the pour, one for the sink and the other for a waste chute. I need to create a hole in the countertop for my DIY sink I'm making from a stainless steel mixing bowl. I didn't have any pipe or anything else the right size for this, so I'll make a disc from scratch. I glued 2 squares of 3/4 inch plywood together to give me a 1.5 inch tall disc, which is also the thickness of the counter I'm making. When the glue dried, I scribed a circle with a compass, then rough cut this disc with a jigsaw. I slightly tilted the table of my disc sander to create a draft angle for this round knockout. Then I rotated it to sand it round and smooth. I gave it 2 quick coats of spray polyurethane to seal it from the wet concrete, to keep it from absorbing any water, and hopefully make it easier to knock out after the concrete hardens. The bottom of the countertop form is made from 5/8 thick melamine coated board. I wanted to buy the 3/4 inch thick board, but in my haste, I pulled the 5/8 from the stack by mistake. It will do, but the 3/4 is stiffer, so it's preferred. Anyways, I cut this to the final width and length of the countertop. I'll mark the cutout for the rear middle leg of the bench and cut this with the jigsaw. The walls of the form can be made from strips of melamine, but I had some 1x spruce around, so I ripped them down, cut them to length, then gave them a quick 2 coats of spray polyurethane. The walls are attached to the base with self-drilling cabinet screws. I marked a guideline on the wall so the screws would end up right in the middle of the melamine. The waste hole will be formed from a section of plastic drain pipe I found. This section had a nice taper to it as it reduced in diameter. I thought that would be just perfect for the waste chute. The plywood disc that will form the sinkhole is screwed to the base of the form from underneath. The plastic pipe will be held in place with a few blocks of wood and a metal strap. A bead of latex-based caulk is added to all corners of the form and around the pipe and plywood disc. I've been using latex caulk for most of my form work as I find it easy to remove later and it's not so overly strong. And it's usually a bit cheaper than pure silicone. I'll be using the same mortar mix that Michael Builds used for his countertops. I've used this mortar mix for my thin concrete garden boxes and the legs on my garden bench. The results are very good. It mixes and pours easily and settles well with very little troweling. I'll put a link to Michael's channel in the description below. So to pour this potting bench countertop, I'll be using 3 bags of Rapid Set brand CSA mortar mix, using a mixing attachment for my drill, and I'll be adding a plasticizer to make it pour like water, along with a small amount of citric acid to extend the working time, and I'll add a small amount of glass fiber to increase the crack resistance. It's very important to level the form along its length and width and support it on a sturdy workbench or sawhorses. Next, I need to spray it with some type of oil to keep the concrete from sticking. I've been using vegetable cooking spray in the past, but I'll be using some WD-40 penetrating oil on this pour. This is what Michael has been using, so I wanted to see if there's any difference. I measure and add the water to a 5-gallon pail. Then add the citric acid and plasticizer and dissolve it. Then I add about 1/3 of a bag of the dry mortar mix at a time, blending it smooth with the mixing attachment on a drill. To the last bit of dry mix, I'll add a small amount of glass fiber. I'm following the manufacturer's recommendation for the amount of fiber to add here. Once I have it blended, I give the bucket a good stir by hand to check for any clumps stuck to the side or bottom of the pail. I have a complete blog post on my website at manabouttools.com with the formula and measurements I used here. When I think I have it thoroughly mixed, I pour the wet concrete into the form. Even though I've added the citric acid and used cold water to extend the working time, I get to the next batch right away. Planning is key here. I have to have everything ready to go for quick, consecutive batches. I vibrate the form with a reciprocating saw to bring any bubbles to the surface. Once the mortar mix begins to thicken, I lay in a wire grid for reinforcement. This is a heavy gauge galvanized hog panel I bought at my livestock fencing supplier. I find that small bolt cutters work very well for cutting the grid down to size. My nice sunny day changed unexpectedly and dark clouds with rain rolled in. I had to put together a quick improvised tent to keep the rain off the wet concrete. Max came by to keep me company for a bit and wait out the rain. Now this is kind of funny as I will need to wet the concrete once it fully solidifies, warms to the touch and develops a white haze. Turns out that began to happen just as the rain stopped and the sun came back out. So I pulled back the plastic and wetted the concrete for an hour while it cured. The next day, I removed the strap holding the plastic pipe in place, as well as the screws from underneath. Marilyn came to help me flip the counter over. Okay, switch hands. Ready to go over?
Yeah. Oh, wait. Caught.
Okay. Perfect. Awesome. I removed all the screws and sides of the form, and the melamine bottom came free. That looks really good.
Looks really good. Beautiful. I can hardly wait.
The plastic pipe came out fairly easily with some tapping from underneath. Yeah, if you want to clean that off of that. That formed pretty nice. It's pretty smooth too. To remove the plywood disc, I drilled a hole and made a cut with a jigsaw. This allowed the sides to come away from the concrete so I could tap the disc free. I used a small block of concrete left over from a previous experiment to smooth the rough edges along the bottom of the countertop. I cut a hole in the bottom of this stainless steel bowl to add a sink trap. A bar sink would have been a good option for this bench as well. And really, this bench would make a good outdoor food prep station beside a barbecue, as a previous viewer had mentioned in the comments. I'll seal the concrete with 2 coats of this Aqua Mix Sealer's Choice Gold. When it was completely dry, we carried the counter out to the bench in the garden, then slid it up onto temporary supports.
I'm down.
Okay, now you gotta lift and slide a little bit. That's it. Just like that.
Nice. All the way in?
Yeah, let's go all the way.
Yeah, baby. It's working.
Push it right up to there.
Not all the way?
A little bit more.
What's that?
That should be good, right? Like that.
Nice. Oh, that looks beautiful.
Yeah.
Woo.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. We pulled those to drop it into place on the rails.
On the other side.
Beautiful.
There were a few spots that needed some shims.
A little bit of a wobble there.
Yeah, that's where we got to shim. I'll put some shims in there and then silicone it.
Nice.
Okay, good. Thanks, hon.
Back up on supports, I laid in a bead of silicone on the rails, then eased the counter into place and tapped in the shims.
Pull it straight out because there's silicone on both sides. Perfect. Awesome.
Next, I'll add the sink. I also use silicone to glue it in place, plus some foam spacers to center it in the hole. I applied some weight while the silicone cured. I'll now connect the sink to the dry well with some ABS pipe and a trap. I don't think the trap is really needed, but I had it and it allows some flexibility when gluing the fittings together. I'm not a plumber, so I'll take all the help I can get. I'll add the 1x6 that goes across the back. Then the shelf supports to the back legs. And then finally, the upper shelves. One by sixes are then screwed to the bottom rails to create the bottom shelf. I'll cut around the drain pipe and also cut around the middle back leg. The back wall of the lower shelf is made from galvanized corrugated metal. I have a piece left over from my rainwater tank surround project last year that I can use for this. I need to cut it to size, and I have found that an angle grinder with a metal cutoff blade gives a good cut. I make up a straight edge from a 2x4 and clamp it to the metal and to sawhorses. Then I run the angle grinder blade guard against this straight edge to make the cut. It took 2 passes, but it works very well. A few minutes with a metal file removes any sharp burrs. These 2 panels will be screwed to 2x2s that were added between the back legs. And I think it ended up looking pretty good. I like the industrial corrugated metal look, and I'll be using it in a few more projects this summer. I have yet to add the faucet for the sink. I think I'll custom fabricate something from copper pipe that will connect to the taps beside the bench. I'll post some pics on Instagram and Pinterest when I get that done. And that's it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.